Hey Jessica! That's so cool. We're just getting set up and we're going to get started in just a minute. Yeah, I was just saying, it's like we've had really good weather in Prince Edward Island, and now this big storm just blew in like an hour ago, so it's super dark here, super windy. So hopefully I don't think we haven't lost power since last summer, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. And I'll be doing a little lesson. I got a couple email questions, a couple questions about paper types, color mixing. So we're going to kind of just start with talking about paper, then we'll get into mixing our paints, that kind of thing, and we'll do some painting together. I want to talk a little bit about creating color palettes, because that's a really good practice, and it's also just fun, and it's a great way to kind of inspire larger projects later on. Hi Lola! Oh, you're in Sweden. That's so cool. We were just saying, like, hopefully this time can work for a lot of people. So that is really cool. Yeah, so we'll talk about a lot of stuff. If you have questions as I'm going along, please comment. Hey Tracy, glad you made it. Hey. Yeah, please say hello as you come in so that we can see who's here, if you want to, and feel free to comment. As I'm painting or color mixing or whatever, I might miss a comment. Chris is here and he's kind of keeping track, so you might hear him like mention to me that there's a comment, or even read a comment out loud. So we're both kind of trying to make sure that all the questions get answered, or if you just want to chat about something, that's fine too.
Mention the delay.
Oh yeah, there's about a 30 or 40 second delay, so just it's good to know that.
So if you comment and
get
to it right away.
Yeah, if you comment and it doesn't seem like we've seen it. Chris is reading all the comments, but it's just everything's like a minute behind. So yeah, and we're very hopeful and confident that we won't have any technical difficulties, because we've been practicing. But if we do, I apologize in advance, and I'm sure we'll have it worked out. But I don't think that we will. Yeah, a lot of people have asked about, is this going to be posted on Patreon? And it will be sometime this weekend, most likely tomorrow. Our goal is always to do the live stream on the last Thursday of the month, and then we should have it posted Friday sometime for those of you that couldn't join in live, which is totally fine. You can always get your questions in. Just email that email address. Is it shada.livestream or livestream.shada?
Oh, give me a second.
I think it's shada.livestream at gmail.
Shada.livestream.
Yeah. shada.livestream@gmail.com. So anytime you can send a question there. Just for this, don't send, like, if you ever have a technical problem on the website or something, send it to our regular email, but send in any watercolor or illustration question, and that helps us to prepare a lesson or a little live stream that hopefully is going to be good and valuable and fun. So hi Virginia. California, that's so cool. It's so cool to see where everybody's coming from. I wish I was in California. Yeah, but that's okay. We have a nice dark snowstorm blowing in. That's cool, I guess. So let's get started. And yeah, okay, so I got a question from Fern about paper types. And, it was from Peggy. Peggy asked about paper types. And so let's talk a little bit about paper. First of all, that's your most important watercolor supply, I always say, because even if you have great paints and even if you have a great painting style, it's just not going to work if you start painting on computer paper, or even if you have a sketchbook that seems like it has a good thick paper. Watercolor paper is specially made, it's very dense, and there's space between the fibers where the paint can really soak in, and that's why you get that beautiful watercolor look. And so watercolor paper is the single most important supply. So one thing that you'll see me use often, and I just love this, is this Canson XL sketch pad. That's from, I usually get that at Walmart. I'm just gonna make that a bit smaller.
Yeah.
So this is a really good sketch pad. It says watercolor right on it. It's cold pressed paper. It's 140 pound, which is the weight that I like to use because you don't need to stretch it. The texture of the paper isn't amazing, but anytime you're doing a practice piece, like it can be really stressful to use your good quality paper all the time. I know even for me, when I sit down and I know I've got like this $50 pad of arches, it's like, don't screw up, don't screw up. So getting this at Walmart or Michael's or Hobby Lobby, it's a good sketch pad because it is heavy enough that you don't need to stretch it. It's cold pressed paper, it's lightly textured, it's not amazing, but it's really good for practicing on. And Peggy, I think you was asking about, you know, when do you use a sketch pad versus not? That's just totally a personal preference. I mean, some artists will do all their work on a sketch in a watercolor sketchbook, and some would never think to pick up a sketch pad and just use single stretched pieces of paper or blocks of paper. I think you know, there's one thing that we always talk about, what I always try to impart on the YouTube channel is just never be afraid of your supplies. You're the artist, and it's up to you how you want to use things, and if you want to, you know, there's just, especially with creative play and hobbies, there's no rules. So if you're comfortable working in sketchbooks, work in a sketchbook. If you prefer paper, you know, just sheets of paper, do that. So I wanted to show you, I got this little sketchbook a couple of years ago at an art store, and it's nice because it's just a nice size, and it's hot pressed paper, which I really like. It turned out though the paper, it doesn't have any tooth, and it's like it's on the way to glossy almost, which I don't like. So, you know, you try some different things, sometimes you like it, sometimes you don't. I think that's hard when you're starting out too. If you get a supply you don't like, it can feel personal, like, oh, I messed up. But sometimes it's just, you're not gonna like that paper. I mean, when I'm sketching, I really hate moleskins. Those notebooks, I don't like the paper. It's almost, again, glossy. I feel like my pen just slides around or something. So, but I do like the shape of this little sketch pad, and the weight of the paper is really good. So I've had some fun doing some little watercolors in here because I love hot pressed paper. And then I also often use these watercolor blocks. So you can see that will be out of focus, but all the pages are sort of glued together. And then on the other side, you have a little space here, and there's just enough room you can slide a knife in, and when you're done your painting, you kind of peel the page off, and that way the paper is stretched. So for the lazy gal, the block is very good. This will be the Patreon bonus tutorial, which comes out March 7th on the first Saturday of the month. So look for that next month. But this is hot pressed. This is my good paper, my Arches. Arches is like super good quality, and I like painting on hot pressed because I like the way the paint settles. It's just, there's no texture, so the paint, I think, just settles really nicely, and you hear me talk about happy accidents with the hot pressed paper. This is Arches as well. You see, yeah, that's the Arches, same brand, hot pressed, 140 pound, all the good stuff, pure cotton. But this one is not a block, so it's a little less expensive. So you can see I was kind of playing around, just practicing here. The thing about hot pressed is those happy accidents are like this, where you can see the paint just has settled kind of funny. It's like you can't plan for that, and I find that's what I really love about hot pressed, are those anomalies. And I often get questions on the channel, some of you have asked, is that bad? Like, some spots are dark and some spots are light, and I think it's a good thing. I think that's kind of part of the beauty of watercolor. You'll hear me talk about like letting the paint or letting the paper kind of do some of the work for you, and so that, and it's not that you can't get that on cold press, but I just find hot pressed, because it is a denser paper, the paint can't and the water can't soak into the fibers of the paper as readily, and so the paint will sit on the surface and kind of dry in a really interesting and beautiful way. So So yeah, paper, totally up to you. I love hot press because of those reasons, but cold press is kind of the Goldilocks because it doesn't, rough is very textured, hot pressed very smooth, and then cold pressed is your Goldilocks in between. So yeah, so we have a few more people joining. Hi Amy from Wisconsin, thank you for saying hello as you come in. If you're just joining, if you want to, please comment so I can see like who's here and see where you're from. There is a bit of a lag, so just know if you comment, Chris and I will we will see it because Chris is reading the comments as well, but it might just take a second. And if I miss a comment, Chris will let me know. So comment with any questions. And yeah, and hi Richard, nice to see you. So now that we've talked a little bit about paper, the takeaway really is use the paper that you like. I think sometimes starting out, it can feel like there's a right way to do things or there's a right supplies, but it really is what's right for you. And it's okay to pick up a sketch pad and be like, I didn't really like that one. So find the product that you're really comfortable with. For me, it's the hot press, but this is amazing, the Canson XL for practicing because it's cheap. So there's like no stress of ruining the paper. So to begin talking a little bit about color mixing and mixing our paints, hey Amy, I just saw that comment. Hi Peggy. We were just talking about paper, so I hope you caught that, but we will be posting this tomorrow as well, so not to worry. And then hi Amy, I just saw you were asking about brushes. Yes, I can definitely recommend good synthetic brushes. You know, the thing about synthetic brushes is I find most synthetic brushes, as long as you find a synthetic set where you can see that the pointed round brush has a really good tip, and usually the brushes will have like just a bit of like a water-based glue in them when they're being sold in the shop, so you'll be able to see their shape as if they were wet when they're in the package or when they're on Amazon. As long as you find a synthetic brush that it looks like it's got a good belly and comes to a nice fine tip, you won't have much trouble. Now the set that I link in most of my newest watercolor videos that says nylon brush set, that's a good set. I also just got these brushes sent to me from Micador. It's an Australian company, so I don't know how readily available it is for purchasing in the US.
They ship internationally.
They ship internationally.
Yeah.
Okay, so they do ship internationally, but I've been really loving their synthetic brush set. But we do have a good synthetic brush set linked under all of our latest watercolor videos as well. But the thing about synthetic is, as long as the shape is good, you know, it's probably going to be fine. But the only thing is, it's just not going to last as long. I actually pick up a lot of synthetic brushes at the dollar store. I mean, dollar stores just sell what they sell. But if you ever see this set that has the gold ring at your dollar store or craft store, I get it.
Is that the nylon set?
Yeah, that's the one.
I'll post a link to it in the comments.
Okay, Chris is going to post a link to that nylon synthetic brush set in the comments below the video. But yeah, if you ever are at a dollar store and you find this set with the gold, I mean, the thing is, I'll buy 3 sets because I'll use them, and then eventually they'll fray. They'll fray after a month of use. And you can see this one's not even straight. It's like the whole brush is warped. Super cheap, but they're fine. Like, they're good. And when you take them out of the package, they're really good. They just won't last as long. And then you've probably noticed I've been using sable hair brushes a lot more lately on the channel. I purchased my first one last summer, I think it was, and it was about $30, which felt like a fortune for a paintbrush. And but then when I started painting with it, I was just blown away by the detail I could get. And this is actually that very first brush that I bought. It is a number 3 Kolinsky sable hair brush. and that is linked. Chris can link that as well. We link it in all of our videos.
The sable hair one?
Yeah, the sable hair.
For sure.
A sable is a type of marten, which is kind of like a weasel or a type of weasel or something. It is a weasel. So that's what's...
It's a Kalinsky sable weasel.
Oh, right. Kalinsky is the sable weasel.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about. So it is an animal hair brush. But I just find the thing is, the reason I liked it was the tip, that point. It holds such an incredible point, and yeah, that's the one. And the more you practice with it, the less you'll have to pick up a small brush to do your small points and a large brush to do the larger things. And the thing about the animal hair brush is that you can just get such an amazing fine detail with it. I'll mix up just a little bit of paint. I mean, you've seen me use it on YouTube, but the thing is, you can get, you know, you can, as usual, you can lay down that large area of color by just adding that pressure.
Tanya just came in. Tanya Mira from the...
Oh, cool. Hi, Tanya. That's so crazy, Switzerland. And then when you, you know, want to do something smaller, that fine point is your friend, and you can, you know, get an incredible amount of detail and precision.
We had a question. Does the brush you were holding before say pointed round?
Pointed round, the Micador?
Yeah.
Or...
I mean, they all would be.
I mean, these all are pointed round. This Micador one just says round. The thing is, it's really hard to standardize, and all the brushes, you know, I'll always say, this is a size 3, this is a size 6. That's actually what this is. This is a nylon size 6 and the sable hair size 3. But then another brush company might size a little differently. So sometimes I'll be like, oh, but this is also a size 6, you know? So it's not a perfect system just because of different countries, and, you know, we're in an international market now, so it can be a bit confusing. But again, you know, what I always want to impart is just use the supplies that feel right to you. It might be that the size 6 brush is kind of your Goldilocks, your perfect brush. For me, it's always a 3 or a 4 usually. That's like my perfect size. So most round brushes are a pointed round, but some will just say round. But there are round brushes as well. So this one, this is a sable hair brush that I have that is round. It is a round brush. I'm going to put this guy down. So here on this side I have a pointed round brush. It comes to a very fine point. This is a round brush. It doesn't come to as fine of a point, but it still does come to a point. Whereas, where's my other one? This guy over here. This one is a large brush, just like the round one that I have here. But it's a pointed round, and it comes to an incredibly fine point. So I think you can, so let's move that around. So on the right, I have 2 pointed round brushes. On the left, I have a round brush. It still comes to a point, but I would say that for the most part, when I'm in an art store and I'm looking at a whole wall of brushes, most of the round are pointed round. But if you do get a round brush, these can be great for doing the shapes of petals and leaves, because you can just put down a nice big splotch really easily. But I definitely find the pointed round brush is my favorite tool. There's just nothing beats it, because you can do both. You can do a little detail work, you can get very fine. I mean, even with a large brush head or large belly, you can still get incredible precision. I was looking at the camera, not at the paper. Yeah, so, and then with that same brush, you can, you know, get these much larger areas of color. So this is a good practice exercise, is just to, you know, pull the brush across the page, see what kind of shapes emerge when you use that large belly versus when you just use the tip of the brush.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why does that brush have the end squeezed tight? So I think that you mean the point, like...
The point? That's just the shape of the pointed round, is that it comes to that very fine point. So on the pointed round, those bristles, they reach that really beautiful fine point, which is how you can get, you know, with one brush, that difference. Whereas this round brush, you know, you're just not going to get as much precision. But I like the round and pointed round because of the way they are shaped, because it comes to that fine point, just because they are so useful for so many different things, so many different painting techniques. So let me show you with even this larger one. I mean, this one can really lay down a huge area of color. Ooh. But it's, even though it... What?
You said the end of the metal tube is squeezed? Oh, I see. The metal tubing, I think she means.
Oh,
like,
this?
Yeah, why is that squeezed flat versus...
Oh, I don't know. Just the way the brush is made.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm not sure.
That would just be a locking mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference to how the paintbrush is used, does it?
I don't think so. Honestly, I wouldn't say I have like a definite answer, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's just it's definitely just a difference in how the brush is made. For me, that doesn't affect how I hold it or how I use it at all, but honestly, I don't want to give like an answer when I'm not really sure. But yeah, just the difference. A lot of flat brushes would have that shape. Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about mixing colors, because I did get a few questions about color mixing, and it kind of goes in order. We talked a little about paper, a little about brushes, but if you have questions about either of those, let me know, because we can talk about anything. So let's talk about our color mixing a little bit. I'm just going to get some of these out of the way. Well, one thing that I never mention on the channel that I always mean to is that you should never leave your brushes sitting in the water like that. So if you're using one and you leave one there, it's just, it's bad for the bristles, it's bad for the paintbrush. So always try to give them a little rinse and just let them down and let them sit if you're picking up a different brush. Okay, let's talk color mixing. So as usual, I have my 2 glasses of clean water. You can probably see that. I always try to use one for cool colors and one for warm colors. And that's just so that because watercolors are so delicate, that's just so that my colors don't get muddy. And you really should switch up your water as often as you need to. If you feel like your colors are starting to get a little, definitely just go grab fresh water, because the paints are really so delicate and it's all about the water. So let's talk mixing, because we don't often really get into this on YouTube either. When I start painting something, let me pick up some reds here. I would get the brush really wet, and then I'm going to really scrub. I'm going to move that over so you can see much better. So I have a very wet brush and I'm really scrubbing that pan, and then I'm bringing that pigment over to my palette. So I want to mix up my colors before I hit the page. I really don't, not often do I want to take color directly from the palette onto the page. I want to get things mixed up here. So I'll grab a bit more water there, mix in some more water, get my brush wet, wet, wet. We'll mix in a darker magenta, and then I'm scrubbing that pan really picking up a lot of pigment in my paintbrush. And we'll bring it over here, mix that, put a little more water in. So at this point, what we have is a nice watery paint, but that has a lot of pigment in it as well. And this also allows you to really mix up just the right color. You'll hear me often talk about, this is a personal preference, but I like to mix brown into my paint just to get it a little more muted. Oh, and I should show you how to properly do that. So, say I've just been mixing water into my magenta pink here. Now what I'll do is clean my brush. I've got a clean wet brush. I'll go and I'll scrub that brown pan. And then I'll bring that over, and I won't necessarily just mix it all in. I'll kind of say, okay, just mixing in a bit of brown. Oh, that's too much brown. Wash that brush off with a clean, wet, very wet brush. Pick up a little more magenta and mix that in. That way you keep your pans pretty clean as well. But I mean, I get messy as I'm going along and I forget to do that. And all you have to do to clean your pans off if you've got, you know, a bunch of pink all over something is, of course, just wet, clean brush, and you can, you know, tidy up a pan before you put the paints away. So it is not a big deal. So I often get questions about your colors just not being rich enough or pigmented enough. They seem a little light or shallow. I think it's just about really scrubbing the pan and picking up that pigment. I know the Koi set, the paints are very hard, but I love the Koi set and I used it for many years, still use it. But you really have to scrub with your brush. So the Munyo sets, I find, and the Derwent, the paints come up really nicely out of the pans. So that is a good feature. So let's see what this looks like on the page. I'll just put a little there. So even though this is not coming directly from the pan, we have this really nice, rich, saturated color. And then what I like to practice doing in my sketchbook is to take a wet brush and kind of bleed that out and try to make it so that you don't have a harsh line there. It's just a good practice. Now we could add a little more pigment into this area. So we're doing kind of an ombre, and it's just a good way if you're mixing colors to you know, practice your technique. So and it also allows you to see what the watercolor paint is capable of. Like if you've mixed up a beautiful color, what does it really look like? Well, here it's really dark and rich, but over here it's softer, and that kind of leads me into what I also want to do today as an exercise is do a little sketchbook page where we talk color palettes a little bit. This is something that I am trying to do more often because it's just a good practice. I try to sit down and take a minute and just work out some color palettes. Here's a page that I did a little while ago. It's just a way for me to think about color and have fun without, you know, sometimes when at least for me, when I start a floral painting, I just won't know what colors to do, and I just can't. I feel like I have a block and I can't think of anything because there's this pressure to come up with a good color palette. So what I've started doing is on the weekend, I'll sit down and I'll just try to think of some nice color palettes, maybe some blues and grays, or I really like this one where you kind of have these modified primaries with a toffee brown. And that way, when you go to do a floral painting or any kind of painting, you can kind of refer back to your little watercolor sketchbook, and you've got all these color palettes already thought out, and you can just pick and choose from a beautiful page of palettes. And then it's also a really good way to kind of practice your watercolor technique, see what the paints can do, see what your brush can do. And honestly, sometimes I'll find colors in my palette that I'm like, oh yeah, I never used that color. Like that bright blue, I feel like I just discovered that when I was making this color palette sheet. So that's what I thought we could start with. I I mean, start, we're talking supplies and all this stuff, but yeah, I think it'll be fun to kind of try and come up with some color palettes, and you can follow along and do the same ones I'm doing, or come up with some of your own.
Yeah,
just gonna take a sec and see color palettes. Cool. If you're just asking about how you mix, it's actually a great idea if you're mixing to jot down some notes and say like, okay, this is you know, Payne's gray mixed with purple, or mixed with magenta or something. Or sometimes if you've got a large set like mine, the 48 pan, you could just be using the colors from the set and just keep some notes there as well. What I like to do is do a little color chart anytime that I get a new paint set, and that can help you keep track of what's here. You could always number them as well. You could actually put a number right over them, and that would be an easy way to kind of jot down in your sketchbook what you used. So, you know, you could number everything, and then. Yeah, I do. I love pan paints, and I've tried to get more used to the tube colors, and I even have the Dr. Martens liquid colors. The liquid colors just run away from me. I am not good with them. I feel like I'm painting with food coloring or something. I really struggle. I'm sure if I use them more, I could kind of wrangle them, but I find they're just so bright and they're so liquid, and so it definitely takes time. Also, when I've taught watercolor classes in person, a lot of people have said, you know, going from tube paints to the pans is just so much easier, and I couldn't agree more. There's just something about the pans. It's like you can have a large color selection, you can just pick up as much paint as you need, and you know, the channel is really, it's not a fine art channel, not by any means. This brand, this space is all about just having fun and being able to sit down and paint on a Saturday without fear or without feeling like you're not good enough to do that. So for me, the pans are just kind of like ready to go, and it makes the painting process so easy and approachable and enjoyable. So yes, pans, yes. So yeah, let's talk a bit about color palettes. Sorry, I'll just read that comment from Jessica. Do you find that your colors mix better when you are starting with a single pigment colors as opposed to mixed? Do you find that your colors mix better when you're starting with single pigment colors as opposed to mixed pigment colors? I don't find, I find that it's, I think with a good set of paints, it shouldn't make a huge difference.
Depends on the paint set.
Depends on the paint set, yeah. Probably. Yeah. The better quality sets, I think you'll definitely find that the colors mix a little better, and that just of course has to do with the pigments that the brand is using and the quality of them. But no, I don't think so. I haven't found that necessarily, and I'm not even someone who uses like the best quality sets, so I find that the Muño really mixes really well, and I'm a bit of a messy mixer, and I'll play and just have fun with the colors, and they tend to mix up really well. And I think, I mean, in Canada we might have paid $70 for this. 80? But
that's just because we're in Canada.
Yeah, in Canada. But I think on the American Amazon it was like $30 or something. So this is not an expensive set. And I also love those Derwent Inktense pocket pans. They mix up really beautifully. The pigments. Yeah, pardon?
The set.
Oh yeah, the number 2 set. They have a couple sets, Derwent does. Those are beautifully pigmented. I mean, for the price. And they mix really well. And that number 2 set, I just love all the colors in there. I mean, I've talked a little bit about finding a set that's right for you. If a set, if a watercolor set has a bunch of browns and reds, that might not be my set. I'm always looking for, does it have a magenta? Does it have a dark blue? I love those rich, cool colors, winter colors I tend to use a lot. So you know, find the set that really speaks to you. There's no perfect art supply. It's really just all about what you like. So let's come up with, is that pretty dry? I think so. Let's come up with some color palettes. Let's have a little fun. I mean, I've already got this beautiful sort of deep magenta mixed up. I'm going to mix a little more red in there. Truthfully as well, like I would mix up these colors and then for me it's just a basis to spark the idea and the memory. So even if I didn't write down exactly how I mixed it, I think it's just to kind of spark that idea of, oh yeah, I loved the way that purple and maroon and mustard looked together. And then, you know, if I couldn't mix it exactly for another project, that's okay, but it's just to kind of like, oh yeah, that was a good color palette, that was good. So let's start with one here. We'll do a little bit of that deep magenta. The nice thing about color palettes is, again, you can practice. Let's bleed that out a bit so you can really see what can we get out of this color. We can get this really deep, rich color. Oops, I got a little crazy there. But we can also get this beautiful, very soft, very, very light pink. So that looks good. Right away I'm thinking I would like to match the richness of that with a deep blue-gray. This Munoz set has, I'm going to move that over, I'm going to make this a little smaller. There we go. Move that a bit. I hope you can see okay. We're trying to kind of have the best scenario that we can. Let's see. I'm just going to read this comment. Any tips on painting with a single color? Felt mine from the watercolor course just looked all one tone-ish. Okay, yeah, we ended with a monochromatic piece. Not enough light and dark contrast. Yeah, I mean, it's really about just practicing and thinking about adding water versus not adding as much water. Let's talk a little about that here, because if you're doing a little color palette, this can be a good place to actually practice that. So here I'm picking up this really dark blue-gray that's in the Munoz set. I love this color. It's so rich. And then we're going to come in with a wet brush and just bleed that out. And like, it's amazing what a difference we can get just from there to there. I think with that project, yeah, there we go. I can even, we don't need me necessarily.
I was gonna radio for a while.
Bye. That should help a little since we're into painting now. Yeah, that project, it can be tricky and it can feel really strange to paint with just a color just that light. What I'll do is we'll talk a little about color palettes, and then I'll end the live stream just addressing your question a little bit there about, you know, painting with one color, because that's a great question. Thanks, Tracy. Okay, so that looks kind of good. I love the way these two colors look together. I think what I want to pair that with is a little of like a mustardy. I'm going to move that even more so you can see. I feel like I keep moving it. I want to pair this with like a mustardy brown. This is actually a similar color palette to what I used for the Bujo, the 2020 cover page. I used a dark blue and a dark pink with a little bit of like a beige and a peach. Kind of those primary colors, but with a twist. So let's put that together. We could do that. Maybe this one we'll try mixing the other way. We'll go down and bleed that out. This is a great chance to just, what do your watercolors look like? How do they perform on the page? Not only are you working out, you know, color mixing, using that proper technique to get a wet brush, scrub the pan, pick up the paint, mix in some more water, you know, scrub the pan again, get the color you're looking for. So not only are you practicing your color mixing, but then you're figuring out an interesting color palette, and you're also thinking about and looking and exploring how do those colors, how do those pigments look on the page. And the thing is, if you did this in a, you know, a hot pressed sketch pad, it could look totally different. And that, I mean, that's just fun. I know that could sound overwhelming or something, but again, it should just be about fun and exploring, and I never want you to feel afraid of the supplies. Afraid might be a strong word. I never want you to feel, you know, overwhelmed or like, oh, I wouldn't use that because I don't know how to use it. If it's your art, you use it however you want. When I lived in Toronto, I shopped at this art store on Spadina who's run by a really old guy, and he's kind of a grump, and I would always be buying something, and he would ask what I was buying it for, and I would tell him, oh, that's not going to work. That won't work. Like, I could just see that being such a turnoff for someone. I was just like, I don't care. I'll try it because it's just for fun. But I think in the art world, you know, people mix up fine art and just art for fun, and it can be very intimidating. So what I'm doing here is just mixing up a little bit of this gray. This is like a French gray color that's in the palette here. And then I have a dark purple, so I'm just picking up a tiny bit of that and mixing a little bit of that into the gray to give me this purpley gray. And so that'll be my fourth color in this palette. Ooh, I love the way that looks. That is some good. It's a good gray. We'll bleed that one out a little bit. Okay, first color palette. I love that. See, I could see definitely coming back to that and being like, okay, this is a great palette. We could do flowers in shades of pink and mustard with some beautiful dark blue leaves and a little bit of like light grayish purple accents. So, you know, if you were really stuck on, ooh, I'm not going to remember this, I'm just thinking of it as kind of like an inspiration, like, oh, that'll just spark my memory for future projects to come. But you could write down, you know, I used the yellow ochre, I used a mix of gray and purple for this. You know, this was like probably 10 parts gray, 1 part purple. And if you're really like, I will not remember, you could number all these colors, and you could say, you know, I mixed, you know, 10 parts number 3 with 2 parts or 1 part number, whatever that would be. All right. Okay, let's get rid of me again. There we go. And let's try another one. You don't have to do the same ones as me. I mean, hopefully this will kind of spark your imagination. And did I move that out of the shot again? No. Okay, good. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, I'm not a color. I mean, you guys know this. I'm not a lover of color. I mean, I love color. I do. I'm gonna go down this rabbit hole. I love color. I always think about color, but I am definitely not someone who gets a pack of brush markers and is like, oh great, red, orange, blue, green. You know, I want the like beige marker with the light purple marker, with the off-white marker. So I'm mixing up a little bit of this guy down here, this aqua color, scrubbing that, and then what I want to mix with that is, I think that would look cool if I mixed it with like this forest green color that I have. Let's do that, and it gives us this really milky green. I could see using this if I was doing a project with like eucalyptus or something, a wreath maybe. Put a little of that on the page. And then what happens if we just like go like that and leave it? That's kind of cool, the way the paint will run and it's like just doing its own thing. Great space to experiment. Oh, one other question I got was about asking about sometimes getting rings around your paint where you've got a light area, say a leaf, and there's just this dark ring around the entire edge. I was actually, when I was doing some of this practice work, I was trying to make that happen here and I couldn't get it. But I mean, that does happen to me often. It's just one of those things, if you try to make it happen, it won't. But I think what it typically comes from is when you just have too much paint on the brush and or not too much paint on the brush, when you just have too much paint on the page and you just are trying to fix something and you're adding more pigment and you're adding more water and the water and the pigment just doesn't have anywhere to go and the pigment sort of can't get absorbed, all the water can't get absorbed, and the pigment is naturally kind of going to go out to the edges and you're going to get that dark ring. To me, when that happens to me, it's a sign that I've kind of overworked that subject and I've just done too much. I've put too much water. The thing is, you can wait for something to dry and then layer, but when it's wet, if you're just like, I'll fix it, keep adding and adding, for me, that's when I get that dark ring around, say, a leaf or something like that. So, here I go again. So, I've got this really minty green. Oh, shoot. I was trying to say goodbye. There we go. Gonna get this. So we've got this really sort of milky, minty green. How good would that look with just a dark green? I'm going to scrub this dark green one and I'm going to put a little bit of that gray blue into there. Ooh, yes. Ooh, yes. There we go. How nice would that look with this? Oh, yeah. This is a great way to practice your brush work. Just bleed that out. Ooh. Remember, if you ever have too much water on the page, just wipe your brush so there's no excess moisture in it, and then it can act as an eraser. And you can pick up pigment like that. That's cool. I could see using this like in the background, and if you're trying to kind of do like a very subtle background behind some flowers or something, that would look really cool. And what would look good with that? We've got two greens. What I try to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone a little when I'm doing these palettes, because it's like, it's just practice, Shada. This isn't a real piece. So just try something. So what if we did dark brown? Okay, I'm still in my comfort zone. Little dark brown, and I'm going to, as I often do, I'm going to mix some purple into that brown. Purple cuts the yellow and it gives me a really rich brown that I like a lot. Even if it's on the way to purple, that is okay with me. So let's put that there. Oh yeah, that looks nice. Very nice. Mix that in, see what happens. What happens if... Yeah, I think that's cool. So we've got these really rich brown and green, kind of a milky green. What else would look good with that? This is such a great exercise to just think about color. Yeah, that mint, that's a good green. I use that a lot for eucalyptus, kind of mixing an aqua with a dark green, so the aqua brings just a hint of a chalkiness to it. Love that. But yeah, I just love doing this exercise because it just gets you thinking, what would look good with dark green and mint? And there's no pressure. There's no like, oh shoot, I painted half a painting and now I don't know where to take it or where to go next. It's just for fun. It's just a sketchbook exercise. So let's get crazy. Let's do like a light yellowy mustardy color. I'm gonna mix a little of this guy. Mix in a little water, scrub, scrub, scrub. Let's try it. Oh, I feel like I'm already not liking it, but it's okay. I mean, it could work. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool. Actually, you know what I feel like that needs? It needs magenta. I like that. That is a good palette right there. Yes. There we go. That would be fun. That would be a bit bright for me for a floral piece, but it looks kind of cool. Maybe if I just muted that, put a little more brown into that one, I could see that being like my jam. Jessica was just asking, do you ever find color palettes on Pinterest? Yes. I mean, anywhere. I'll see a piece of artwork that just has cool colors in it. I mean, that just sounds like I'm just copying someone else's art. But I mean, I'll see like an interesting, you know, portrait or something where the colors are really bold. And I'll think, oh, like I should try doing that blue and orange together. I like that. Pinterest is a great place, even just looking at like color palettes for weddings and then trying to match those. I think taking inspiration from anywhere is always a good idea. And so we just have 10 minutes left, so I wanted to jump back and sorry, I forget who was asking about the one-tone-ish colors. Was that
Not sure how to pronounce that.
Besky Nord, we'll say. And I thought that was a good question because and this is something that comes with time, but as you can see, oops, nope, you can't see because of my screen. As you can see here, you know, we've gone from this super, super dark to a much lighter color just by using water, and that's the beauty of watercolors. Some artists mix in white. I have no problem mixing white into my watercolors. I work in pastels often. Other watercolorists will say, no, never mix white in, only use water. It's kind of like a purist thing, I guess. And that's just totally up to you. You might have a painting where you're like, I'm not using any white on this. I'm just using water to lighten. Other times, white all the way. So what I'm going to do is...
Leanne. Besky Nord.
Oh.
Name's Leanne.
Oh, Leanne? Yeah. Leanne, cool. Oh, thanks. Leanne. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the lightest part. And so on my palette, I've got some very dark areas, some lighter areas. And we'll do, you know, I think sometimes for me doing pieces like this, the scary thing can be that you never want to go too light. It's almost like I would start too dark. So my idea would be to encourage you to start really light, lighter than you think you should. And we're going to do this incredibly, very watery, barely there flower. And then maybe we mix in just a little more pigment. And we do another flower that is like just a hair darker. Very loose. So we're at this point, you can see like we have only used that portion of that, you know, rectangle. We haven't even really gotten into the mid-tones, maybe a little. And I mean, we still have all of this to play with. So let's get really dark now, and that could be fun. Since this center has started to dry, I can like maybe add a little, ooh, that one might have been too wet. It might travel too much. Well, as I was just saying, you can always erase with that dry brush. Take it back a notch. Get back. Okay, we have one dark petal, that's okay. And then we'll take that super dark color, and that's what we can use for some of our leaves. So dark. Whoopsie. See, I had too much paint on the brush. It got a little out of control. I wasn't really in control of my shape or my line. That's just because there was just way too much water on the brush. Too much paint equals no control. And there we go. So right there we're starting to, I hope that helps a little. I mean, this is definitely just something that comes with practice too. But think about an easy way to approach it is to think about doing the flowers super light as you can manage, and then do the leaves as dark as you can manage. And I think the mid-tones, this area in here, will kind of take care of itself as you do some flowers and leaves that might not have quite as much pigment or might have a little less. You can go back and do some wet on dry and add a dark center to those flowers. So don't be afraid to start really, really, really light and then go really dark. And sometimes what I'll do if I'm doing a monochromatic blue, like I don't consider it cheating to add a little bit of black or something into it, or even a darker blue. So you could play around with that a little bit as well. I think it's good practice to just use one tube of paint or one pan. But if you needed to, you could say, I just want this dark, I want this richer. So I'm going to mix in, you know what would really richen up this? Maybe a bit of purple. And if you add just a hint of purple, all of a sudden you've got this like crazy rich color. So you could try some stuff like that as well. And just remember, it's just for fun, it's for practice. So you could say, today I'm only working with this one blue and I'm just going to add a ton of water. I'm going to add very little water and I'm going to see what I can do within that. But you could also say, I'm going to add a little black, or as we just did, I'm going to add a little purple. And so I hope that helps a bit. Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay. Helpful, good. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. You know, so many of the questions that we received too, I always think like, oh, I remember like wondering about that when I was starting out with watercolors. I always would just not be happy with my colors. That was a huge thing for me about 5 years ago when I was getting started. And so that's why I started putting black pen over my watercolors. I just was never happy with the colors I had got, and I was never happy with like the shading and the detail. So I would just go in with a Pigment Micron fine liner and just add all the detail at the end, which I think developed a really fun style where I was mixing illustration and watercolor, and I still do that on the channel, and that's what's coming up tomorrow on the YouTube channel. So look for that. Yeah, and that's another thing. I started with watercolor about 5 years ago, so this is like relatively new to me as well, and I've just been playing around and practicing and having fun with it for the last couple of years. So I hope you guys found the live stream a little bit helpful and a lot enjoyable. Get those questions in. The email address is shada.livestream. You can email anytime during the month. Oh, one thing I wanted to say is, Richard, you asked a great question about adding depth and incorporating a sense of depth into your floral paintings or into any painting. And that I just felt was too big of a subject to tackle here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that the topic for the April Patreon video. So the March one is already filmed. It comes out on the 7th, but for the April one, which comes out the first Saturday of April, that will be the topic. So we'll really get into it. I love adding a bit of depth, and adding depth I think can mean maybe adding a bit of a background, which I don't always do, but I have done. And actually using techniques like that where you're allowing the paints to blend and blur and creating a bit of a depth of field, almost the way that a camera would, where parts are a little blurry and a little off. And so we'll talk about that. We'll get into that in that video. So I hope that's okay. It's a great question and maybe a bit of a big topic that we could really dig into. So yeah. Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed this. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Jaja. Yeah. Yay. Cool. Okay, good. Good. Thank you guys so much for coming out and hanging out for an hour and help painting with me a little bit. And I can't wait to see what kind of questions you have for next month. I'm so glad that we didn't have any technical difficulties. First time, and it worked out really well. So I'm really happy about that. Yeah, I think we did good.
Let us know how the quality was.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, like if there's any issues or anything like that, let us know, because we're always working to try and make things better.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
This is new to us.
This
Live
is
streaming is very new.
Very new. So new.
Yeah.
So please, we take it all as constructive criticism, and we want that feedback. So cool. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a really good night, and I'll see you tomorrow on YouTube. We're going to do a watercolor anemones illustrated watercolor that is like the classic Shada style. So yeah. Okay. Bye. Yeah, have a good night. It's like turning off a call.